Good afternoon. My name is Jorge Chidiek. I'm the director of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. And let me open the meeting by wishing everybody a happy United Nations Day for South-South Cooperation. It is an honor for us to commemorate the event with this very high-level panel that is presided over by Ms. Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Adonia Yebere, His Excellency, Permanent Representative of Uganda to the United Nations and President of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, His Excellency Ambassador Martin Garcia Moritan, Permanent Representative of Argentina to the United Nations, His Excellency Feridun Hadi Sinirolu, Permanent Representative of Turkey to the United Nations, and Mr. Achim Steiner, Administrator of the United Nations Development Program. Without further delays, I would invite the Deputy Secretary General to give her keynote address, again reiterating our gratitude for her participation in this celebration.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, my colleague, Administrator of UNDP, Mr. Achim Steiner, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really, really pleased to be here as we celebrate the achievements of the South-South Cooperation for Sustainable Development. Agenda 2030 and Addis Ababa Action Agenda have heralded a new era of commitment for South-South cooperation, and that's why South-South and triangular cooperation is emphasized in frameworks such as the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the Agenda for Humanity. South-South and triangular cooperation offer a path to balancing growth and equity and leaving no one behind. In a nutshell, it is really at the heart of what we do as we try to attain the 17 goals on the Sustainable Development Agenda. 62 years ago, the Bandung Conference was held in Indonesia. 39 years ago today, member states gathered in Buenos Aires and adopted the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for Technical Cooperation and Developing Countries. The Buenos Aires Plan of Action was an expression of the aspirations of developing countries to strengthen their economic, social, and political interdependence, accelerate development, and correct distortions in the international systems caused by the asymmetrical power relations of the colonial era. So we have the history. It's a reflection of their desire to promote cooperation among themselves as a complement to North-South cooperation in fostering international cooperation for development. And that's really where we are today. The adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action marked the beginning of a new phase of cooperation, providing a blueprint and a well-defined mechanism for implementation and follow-up. Since the Plan of Action was adopted, there has been an expansion of the substantive focus on South-South cooperation beyond technical and economic cooperation to other partnerships at the nexus of peace and development. These include partnerships in humanitarian work, climate change, migration, peace building, mediation, conflict resolution, and prevention. There's also been an expansion of actors, including subnational entities such as municipal and provincial governments and non-state actors. Solutions and strategies created in the South are delivering lasting results around the world. Nearly every country in the global South is engaged in South-South cooperation. Recently, the Belt and Road Initiative, championed by China, has partnered with more than 100 countries, and certainly with many, many UN entities. In addition, China's South-South Climate Change Cooperation Fund is now operational and is funding climate change mitigation and adaptation projects around the world. India has announced a $10 billion concessional line of credit to Africa over the next 5 years. It is also leading the International Solar Alliance, which supports developing countries to boost their solar production capacity. And the Strategic Association Agreement established by Mexico and Chile has promoted international cooperation in the political and commercial areas. In Asia and the Pacific, South-South trades accounts for 54% of our total exports and 53% of its imports. The recently established Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank will also provide between $10 to $15 billion in loans each year over the next 15 years, prioritizing sustainability and inclusive growth. Across the Global South, we've really seen remarkable advances. However, we know that progress has been uneven. Extreme poverty, deep inequality, unemployment, malnutrition, and vulnerability to climate or weather-related shocks still persist. According to the UN Multidimensional Poverty Index, 2.2 billion people still living in abject poverty. About 1.4 billion people, the majority in the South, still have no reliable electricity, 900 million do not have access to clean and portable water, and 2.6 billion lack adequate sanitation. South-South collaboration and partnerships offer the opportunity to turn these statistics around. The countries of the South can collectively use their growing potential to meet their infrastructural needs and target investments in green technologies and public goods that are critical for sustainable development. Together, we must identify and encourage the critical areas where South-South cooperation can be effective. These include better policy coordination, regional and economic integration, interregional linkages, and the development of national productive capacities through the exchange of knowledge and technology. I encourage countries of the South-South to further deepen their cooperation to achieve the ambitious agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals. This, of course, must be accomplished with the support of the North. South-South cooperation should not be seen as a substitute for North-South cooperation, but as complementary, and we invite all countries and organizations to engage in supporting triangular cooperation initiatives. I urge all developed nations to fulfill their official development assistance commitments as we continue to implement the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement. The increasing momentum of South-South cooperation also needs to be supported by strengthening institutionalization of these collaborative efforts. The General Assembly has decided to bring all stakeholders together at a high-level United Nations conference on South-South cooperation to formalize and link South-South cooperation to the international development architecture. The conference will be generously hosted by Argentina on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, and it will enable us to coordinate our South-South efforts much better, to build bridges, to cement partnerships, to establish sustainable strategies for scaling up impact together. It will also enable us to make a much better decision in the reforms that we undertake of how this should be actualized at the country level as we endeavor on the plans to implement the 2030 Agenda. I encourage all of you to contribute to the process in your areas of expertise. And on this United Nations Day for South-South cooperation, let us reaffirm our commitment to mutually beneficial approaches that will ensure shared prosperity and make sustainable development a reality in everyone's lives. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General, for your keynote address. I now invite Ambassador Adonia Yebare, Permanent Representative of Uganda and President of the High-Level Committee for South-South Cooperation.
Thank you, Ms. Amina Mohamed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished panelists, Mr. Joe Shadik, Envoy of the Special Secretary General of the South-South Cooperation, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Today we commemorate the United Nations International Day for South-South Cooperation, an occasion to recognize and underscore the cooperative initiatives amongst developing countries that help improve the lives of millions across the global South. It's also a celebration of economic, social, and political developments made in recent years by countries and regions of the South. Solidarity amongst the peoples and countries of the Global South is key for South-South cooperation to contribute to the improvement of economies in developing countries. It should help us as a matter of principle to build capacities to enhance self-reliance for countries of the South to attain their national priorities and other international agreed development goals such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In addition, South-South cooperation is a vital component in the mitigation and adaptation efforts to combat climate change, where many thousand countries stand on the front lines. We welcome the emergence of the new southern financing sources, including regional banks and other national development banks that are designed to increasingly operate within and across regions. We are also grateful for the contribution of South-South cooperation to the international community's efforts to deal with burgeoning humanitarian crisis and disaster risk reduction initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, collaboration between North and the South in a triangular cooperation is also critical and has contributed significantly to the well-being of millions of communities in many countries of the South. Therefore, the Buenos Aires Plan of Action Plus 40 presents us with a rare opportunity to reflect on the achievements and the unexploited potential of South-South cooperation with a view to make it more effective and more beneficial to the communities in the Global South, particularly the most vulnerable, without leaving anyone behind. As the President of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation, I'm pleased to see how our Secretariat, the United Nations Office of the South-South Cooperation, has designed this United Nations Day celebration as an effective tool for highlighting both the goals of member states on South-South cooperation as well as the United Nations support to South-South cooperation. I look forward to continue working with all of you in preparation for the Buenos Aires Plan of Action Plus 40. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ayebare. Now I would like to invite Ambassador Martín García Moritán, Permanent Representative of Argentina.
Thank you very much, and happy South-South Cooperation International Day. I'm very pleased indeed to share this panel with so distinguished authorities. Amina Mohammed, Steiner, PR of Uganda, PR of Turkey. So thank you very much to the Director of South-South Cooperation for the invitation. The Buenos Aires Plan of Action, BAPA, adopted 40 years ago, was primarily intended to promote technical cooperation among developing countries in recognition of the growing importance of South-South relations and increasing demand for equitable and sovereign participation in international relations. The conference held in Buenos Aires established for the first time a framework for this cooperation and include in its practice the basic principles of international relations between sovereign states: respect for sovereignty, non-interference in internal affairs, and equal rights, among others. It also contained a number of innovative and specific recommendations aimed at building legal frameworks, institutional foundations, and financing mechanisms at the national, regional, interregional, and international levels. In an international scenario in which developing countries sought a greater voice and alternative solutions to the prevailing economic and political order, the BAPA aimed to foster interest in technical cooperation, defined as an instrument capable of fostering the exchange of successful experiences between countries that share close historical realities and similar challenges. 40 years on from the adoption of the BAPA, the increasing role of developing countries has translated into an increasingly multipolar international scenario. The traditional paradigm based on the unidirectional north-south flow of cooperation can no longer explain this more complex, heterogeneous, and interdependent reality. The agendas, methodologies, and actors involved in the international development cooperation system are currently being redefined. The current scenario is characterized inter alia by the growing influence of developing countries and actors, including local governments, parliaments, academia, private sector, civil society organizations, and philanthropic foundations, and the relevance acquired by South-South and triangular cooperation. This and other dynamics have led to a broad debate on how to expand and democratize international cooperation structures and mechanisms in order to integrate all forms of cooperation, recognize the value of increasingly dynamic actors, and achieve effective interventions in the field. The adoption in 2015 of the 2030 Agenda, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction reaffirms an ambitious global commitment to promoting sustainable and inclusive social, economic, and environmental development, which has a high impact on international cooperation. In order for the new agenda to be comprehensively implemented and not to be merely an expression of ambitions, there's a need to further develop institutional capacities and mechanisms and coordinate policies at all levels. In this context, it is still necessary to develop an analytical framework that articulates and coordinates different forms of international cooperation initiatives and consolidates the resources needed for implementing the 2030 Agenda. Collective responses that integrate the vision and joint effort of all actors without exclusions will be needed to meet this challenge. The second United Nations High-Level Conference on South-South Cooperation, to be held in Buenos Aires in 2019, is a historic opportunity to reflect on the progress made and the results achieved in the past decades, and to analyze the importance of current BAPA approaches in light of recent developments. The key is to identify the challenges and opportunities of this new stage and build an architecture of international cooperation in which all countries participate based on their potential and competitive advantages and benefit according to their needs, in line with the principle of leaving no one behind. The Nairobi Conference on South-South Cooperation 2009 took place almost a decade after the adoption of the MDG. While reaffirming the principles and creating new commitments to promote South-South cooperation, it has been unfeasible for various reasons to redefine and promote its inclusion in the global development strategy established at the Millennium Summit. This will not be the case of the BAPA Plus 40 conference. It will be an opportunity to revalue our country's contribution to development through South-South cooperation actions and set up global support programs, measures and policies that increase their impact, scope, and sustainability in the next years. We believe this form of cooperation is an effective means of implementation to achieve the SDG and an exemplary partnership model for sustainable development. Just as the BAPA outlined in 1978, a horizon on which the countries work in the ensuing decades, the conference in Buenos Aires provides a unique opportunity to identify national, regional, interregional, and global lines of action that should form part of the strategies of governments, regional agencies, and the United Nations system. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Ambassador Garcia Moritan. And now invite Ambassador Feridun Hadi Sinirlioglu, Permanent Representative of Turkey.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Administrator, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to speak today on the occasion of United Nations International Day for South-South Cooperation. I thank Mr. Chediek for organizing this event and Deputy Secretary General for being with us here. South-South cooperation has enormous potential for developing countries to scale up their efforts towards sustainable development. It builds on political willingness, growing capacity, and real development expertise. The strengths of South-South cooperation rightfully have been acknowledged in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Therefore, it must play a key role in achieving the SDGs. South-South cooperation offers a significant resource channel. However, it needs further predictability and strategic planning, as well as improving the means of coordination and communication. Distinguished participants, development cooperation is an integral part of Turkish foreign policy. In this context, we cultivated relations not only with our immediate neighbors, but also with countries in distant regions. The solid economic growth that we achieved in recent years has enabled us to contribute to raise the living standards of the people of developing countries. As a South partner, we consider sustainable development and poverty reduction an effective means for moving closer to the goals of peace and stability. A wide variety of government agencies are involved in the implementation of our development cooperation policy. However, the key player is the Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TİKA, which operates in over 30 countries. The Turkish private sector and civil society have also been taking various actions in many countries and sectors. Direct investment and concessional loans, in addition to official development assistance, have been important instruments of our cooperation. Turkey's ODA has increased to $6.2 billion according to the OECD preliminary data for 2016. I am pleased to highlight that Turkey exceeded 0.7% ODA GNI target determined by the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition, Turkey has been working closely with the UN Office for South-South Cooperation to share policy research and analysis, as well as to strengthen centers of excellence and other capacity building. In this regard, Turkey is one of 9 countries participating in the partnership initiative on South-South and triangular cooperation for agricultural development and enhanced food security. Within the framework of this initiative, Turkey hosted the South-South Knowledge Exchange Workshop on management of farmer-based organizations in July 2015, as well as a follow-up training in January 2016 in Izmir. UN Office for South-South Cooperation, in partnership with Islamic Development Bank, recently mapped Turkey's centers of excellence. Distinguished participants, I also take this opportunity to announce that we will be hosting the 9th Annual Global South-South Development Expo in Antalya from 27th to 30th November 2017 under the title South-South Cooperation in the Era of Economic, Social and Environmental Transformation, Road to the 40th Anniversary of the Adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. The Global South-South Development Expo is an annual event designed to showcase evidence-based successful development solutions and initiatives that are emerging from the Global South. It provides a platform for development actors and stakeholders to celebrate South-South and triangular successes, share knowledge and lessons learned, explore new avenues for collaboration, and initiate new partnership efforts. This year's Expo intends to encourage forward-thinking about the future of South-South cooperation. Its theme, South-South Cooperation in the Era of Economic, Social and Environmental Transformation, acknowledges that the next phase of development will take place in a world that is almost unrecognizable from just 20 years ago. As the host country, we expect a large number of participants from diverse backgrounds. On this occasion, I would like to invite Madam Secretary General and Mr. Administrator to Antalya in November. Your cooperation on promoting the Expo would be highly appreciated. We look forward to hosting you all in Antalya. Thank you.
Mr. Achim Steiner, the Administrator of UNDP, to make his remarks. And I want to highlight, before giving you the word, our gratitude as an office for the support you provide to South-South cooperation and your personal engagement.
Thank you, Georgie, and DSG, distinguished representatives, the permanent representatives of Uganda, Argentina, and Turkey, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We already began celebrations on South-South cooperation last night when we were celebrating also one of the elements and illustrations of this, of the India, South Africa, Brazil partnership around South-South cooperation and the fund that they established. And it is my pleasure to join you today on this occasion and together with the DSG and you as hosts on this occasion. As Georges just pointed out, since 1974, when the UN Office for South-South Cooperation was established, UNDP has had the honor of hosting it. And I think if you look back over this period, which is now a number of decades, it is very interesting to see how the notion of South-South cooperation has not only evolved, but has also changed in significance and scale and implications for what happens next on our planet, literally in our global economy and in the partnerships we have. I don't want to underestimate the many activities and initiatives taken, at least to make the notion of South-South cooperation through the office and the close interaction with the G77 plus China here in New York, a concept that moved the aperture of looking at international cooperation from one that even in terms of the birth of UNDP was very much a north-south philosophy. Not a negative one at the time. I mean, it was actually an act of solidarity. But as we quickly began to learn, development, first of all, does not mean you have to be rich or big in order to know what development can achieve. And conversely, that actually sometimes the most creative and entrepreneurial and innovative solutions are those developed by countries or communities that actually have to make do with much less in order to be able to make progress. And that, to a certain extent, began to also influence another era of South-South cooperation. How would you be able to come up with better answers in terms of development pathways and choices and technology solutions in a country where, you know, the electric infrastructure wasn't there, the transport infrastructure wasn't there yet, the space in the global economic trading system wasn't established, and therefore you had to look for alternative pathways. And this is where I think South-South cooperation began to truly take on a different identity. It began to demonstrate that sometimes the more immediate answer could lie with your neighbor rather than with a distant neighbor. I think through these years, UNDP and together with the UN Office for South-South Cooperation increasingly was part of a large number of actors to enable a new vision of South-South cooperation to emerge. And when we sit here today to celebrate this day, I think it is useful to reflect on it because we have not reached the peak. South-South cooperation, both as a concept, as a platform, but also as a vision, is going to continue to evolve. And therefore, Ambassador, I think when you host in Argentina the Buenos Aires Plus 40 meeting, it will be a very interesting moment also to reflect on the future priorities, platforms and directions for South-South cooperation. I myself was very happy to be part of co-hosting the 2013 Global Expo on South-South cooperation, which, much to my surprise at the time, was the first expo ever hosted in a developing country, which kind of struck me as very odd in the year 2013 when we hosted it in Nairobi. And at that point, it to me illustrated how this concept was beginning to mature from a political vision to increasingly actually a platform for cooperation that could find a place on which to convene almost anywhere in the world. Which kind of brings me to this question of when we meet in Argentina, we also need to ask ourselves, South-South cooperation began as a vision, a political platform also on which to rebalance a system of international cooperation. But let's be honest, it is also something that is in the national interest. I think we should always recognize that we need to be more explicit about what is that national interest that will drive the engagement of countries with either their neighbors or other developing countries for that matter. And I posit this point because it raises to me the interesting question, why would South-South cooperation turn to rely on or take advantage of the United Nations as a platform on which to develop and to grow this form of cooperation? I certainly don't pretend to sit here today and have the answers for that, but I think to me as administrator of UNDP, who perhaps because I'm already of a next generation, consider South-South cooperation to be distinct but actually integral to the work of UNDP. And in those two words, I don't mean to hide the many different dimensions to this, but I also want to project to you an understanding that South-South cooperation should actually cease to be something exceptional and become something normal, alongside many other forms of cooperation, whether North-South, triangular. And that conversation, I think, is one that in Argentina, I think would be a great moment to take up, because I think the UN's valuable role in South-South cooperation alongside the national leadership by countries that, you know, we have seen time and again, is to perhaps also focus on the shared interest. and not only on the national interest, on creating the vehicles and taking advantage of the infrastructure that we have built up together over the last 70 years in the United Nations for cooperation, and to ensure that South-South cooperation becomes, in a sense, the new normality in the way we work. And yet, it retains a distinct and particular purpose. But these are just a few thoughts as we celebrate this day here today, and I simply want to thank you again, President, who is leading at the moment the South-South cooperation discussions here. And as many of you will know, the DSG and I are intensely engaged at the moment as part of the reform process also to understand how South-South cooperation can be better enabled by our system for development in the UN. So thank you once again for inviting me, and thank you, Georgia, also for the good preparations. Thank you.
Administrator. And now the program foresees some comments from the floor. We already have a request from Japan and from China. And before giving the word to Japan, I would like to thank Japan, one of the pioneers in triangular cooperation. And I got an interesting statistical element that Japan started doing South-South cooperation when their GDP per capita, even updated by purchasing power and by the evolution of time, is higher than most middle-income countries today. So, Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Moderator, particularly for your warm words, and Excellencies and distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to join this celebration of the United Nations Day of South-South Cooperation, and I'd also like to thank the UN Office for South-South Cooperation for organizing this very important event. Sustainable Development Goal number 17 calls for the revitalization of the global partnership for sustainable development. Accordingly, the importance of South-South, and I should emphasize triangular cooperation is greater now more than ever. And Japan, as a moderator kindly mentioned, consider ourselves as a pioneer in this area, and have a history of implementing a great number of South-South and triangular projects over the years, and is still very much active in this area. And as of today, Japan is implementing about 100 such projects around the world. So in this regard, as Administrator Steiner said, that Japan considers this South-South cooperation as a part of normal, regular practice in our development assistance, if I should say. And I'd like to highlight one area of cooperation that is a disaster reduction and prevention. We have witnessed the terrible devastation, massive devastation in the Caribbean islands, countries, and also the southern part of the United States, even here on these natural disasters, and which is very much recently exacerbated by the climate change. And so that the cooperation in this area, South-South and triangular cooperation in particularly in this area is effective. So I'd like to take one example of our cooperation with Chile. Chile, like Japan, is an earthquake-prone country, but both countries have learned a lot of lessons from our past experiences and have conducted research and developed countermeasures accordingly, so that Japan and Chile now cooperating to each other so that information, knowledge, and methodologies on local disaster risk management can be commonly utilized throughout the Latin American region. And in this regard, Japan deeply appreciates Chile's cooperation as a partner in this area. The two notable features of South-South and triangular cooperation are first, the creation and sharing of knowledge in cooperation with various actors, and second is a capacity building for partner countries and institutions. Both features are also essential for the achievement of the SDGs. In Japan, the importance of South-South and triangular cooperation is stipulated in our National Development Cooperation Charter, as well as the midterm plan of JICA. That is our ODA implementing agency of Japan. That makes it our practice regular and normal. So we will continue to promote and implement South-South and triangular cooperation so that we can achieve sustainable development goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Japan. We have in the list of requesters China, Panama, Brazil, Ireland, Colombia, and FAO. I would invite all of you to speak no more than 2 minutes so the panel can have the last word. So, and 2 minutes is 2 minutes. So, China, please.
Oh, sorry. So last 30 seconds has passed. Thanks, South-South Cooperation Office for holding this event, and especially thanks to the DSG for her support to South-South Cooperation, and thank the UNDP for its support to South-South Cooperation Office work over the years, and your own participation in supporting South-South cooperation and undertaking triangle cooperation. China is always in support of South-South cooperation, which is not a substitute, but a complement to North-South cooperation. And it's a very important way for South countries to sharing experiences, helping each other within their own comparative strengths and pursue common development. And it has put a lot of focus on improve people's livelihood, especially in the area of health, education, sanitation, rural development, and infrastructure development. We think that South-South cooperation can play a bigger role in the age of the SDG agenda. And we're certainly looking forward to learning with other countries and working together with other countries and UN agencies. In recent years, we have announced several initiatives to step up our contribution to the South-South cooperation. Like our President Xi Jinping has announced that in last year, in 2015's UN high-level meeting, that China has established assistance fund for South-South cooperation. This fund has already opened to application. And also we have established an Institute for South-South Cooperation and Development, and this institute has already started work and already graduate coming from this institute. And we think that UN development funds and programs play a leading role in the international development cooperations. You have vast knowledge, expertise, and experiences, and dedicated leaders, and a very powerful working team. We would like to see that UN entities to act on their own strengths and comparative advantage and support developing countries, support South-South cooperation by showing your strengths and sharing innovative knowledge and measures and bridge the gaps so that we can join force to help the development of the world. And we encourage the South-South Cooperation Office to continue your important work and further your service and coordination to other UN entities. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, China. Now, Panama, please.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues, Madam DSG, members of the panel. I'm delighted this afternoon to join in the celebration of this day, contributing 3 quick points. Firstly, let me thank the United Nations South-South Cooperation Office for your dedicated and intense work. Panama recognizes the importance of the United Nations Development System, continuous support to South-South cooperation, especially on the technological component, which connects us and also enables a more institutionalized cooperation mechanism that we have to continue to work on, as has been said by the panel. We expect the United Nations Development System to maintain its contribution in decision-making policies and other actions that reinforce South-South and triangular cooperation, such as research and analysis, capacity building, knowledge networks, and centers of excellence, as well as data exchange. The increase of poverty caused by inequalities, globalization, and the increasing need to implement holistic approaches to those global challenges are factors that have a significant repercussion in international cooperation. Accordingly, intervention should be as efficient as possible and promote South-South and triangular cooperation frameworks supported by a strengthened institutionality and also guided by internationally recognized principles like solidarity and mutual benefit. South-South cooperation has been gaining momentum, and it is accomplishing a key role in the international community. We should remember that South-South cooperation should not replace North-South cooperation, but rather serve as a complement and support. As a matter of fact, traditional donors' technical and financial support continues to be critical to leveraging the cooperation for developing countries. Second, my delegation advocates the recognition of middle-income countries as subjects of cooperation to ensure the achievement of SDGs and other global priorities. At the same time, we are aware of our growing role as net cooperators. In that respect, Panama launched our National Plan for International Cooperation, aligned with the Strategic Government Plan and the SDG Agenda. And in a way, we believe that middle-income countries can become laboratories for institutionalizing South-South cooperation in this next phase. Lastly, BAPA plus 40 and the upcoming 2019 high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation gives us the opportunity to move beyond any skepticism that still may prevail around the benefits of South-South cooperation and establish South-South cooperation as an effective mechanism for implementation of Agenda 2030. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Embajadora. Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Also want to highlight that Panama very recently established a national cooperation agency. Congratulations on that initiative. Now the representative of Brazil, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shediak, and thank you for organizing this celebration meeting. I would also like to thank the Deputy Secretary General and the Administrator of UNDP and the distinguished ambassadors for sharing their views on this transformative and very important modality of cooperation. I would also like to take a bit of time just to thank Argentina for the very generous offer to host BAPA plus 40. I think it will be definitely a milestone in our discussions on this issue. I'll just try to outline very briefly in less than 2 minutes the views that Brazil has on the main elements of this whole process. We consider that the preparatory process of BAPA plus 40 is a great opportunity to establish a positive and conceptually precise narrative on the contribution of South-South cooperation for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This contribution is as diversified as the modality itself, either in nature or in format. Diversity is our greatest value and must be fostered. Furthermore, in our opinion, only part of South-South cooperation could be classified as an additional funding source for the agenda. And non-financial benefits of this modality are very important and have great impact on policymaking. This must be acknowledged. We expect BAPA plus 40 to incorporate relevant conceptual advancements that may have taken place since 2009, while at the same time not reversing the Nairobi principles, which remain as relevant today as in 2009. In our view, the preparatory process should, first, identify the issues that should be addressed by the conference, establish orienting questions on those issues, and it should also make use and strengthen networks of national focal points in developing countries for South-South cooperation. These focal points should be invited to elaborate concept notes on the orienting questions, as well as on other aspects that they may deem relevant for the conference. This engagement with the real practitioners of South-South cooperation will be critical for a successful meeting. Mr. Chair, Brazil looks forward to hearing the views of others in this regard, and we state that we remain engaged on the road towards Buenos Aires. Thank you very much.
Obrigado. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite the permanent representative of Ireland, also giving her the welcome. She recently arrived and stand.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chedek, Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Steiner, distinguished colleagues. It's a particular honour for me to be here today to celebrate South-South cooperation. Ireland is sometimes regarded as a bit of an interloper in the north. We exhibit many of the characteristics of our southern friends, and somehow I think we are naturally southern by nature. So it's a particularly good day to be an Irish delegate surrounded by colleagues on South-South cooperation. I'll be very brief with 2 points. The first I want to make is really to say that we particularly applaud the effort in moving ahead in refreshing the vision of the South-South cooperation. We noted that the Secretary General describes it as a scaling up, but we also see that you have not just refreshed your vision, but that you are reinforcing your solidarity. And in the South-South cooperation context, we see that as a shared value, frankly. Achim Steiner in his introduction spoke about the delivery of the SDGs as a shared interest. The reinforcement of solidarity, which we fully support, is a very important development in our view in the longer history of South-South cooperation. The second point I wanted to make is that two of the central key strengths of the evolving cooperation in our view are both capacity building and resource mobilization. These are very powerful tools. The President, our President, my colleague from Uganda earlier used the phrase in discovering the unexploited potential of South-South cooperation, and we see this as really powerful tools in delivering just on that unexploited potential. And I'll finish up by saying that we from Ireland would like to be considered a sincere partner in supporting your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. I would like to invite the Deputy Permanent Representative of Colombia, highlighting that Colombia is organizing today a national celebration. So thank you very much for having this outside New York too.
We are very happy, thank you very much, to celebrate and to be here, Mrs. Amina Mohamed, Mr. Achim Steiner, dear ambassadors, and Mr. Jorge Chediek. Thank you very much for convening this meeting today. Since the adoption of the resolution in 1978, the UN Day for South-South Cooperation has been honored, and it has marked the beginning of technical cooperation among developing countries whose dynamics we are aware of. For this reason, in 2018, 40 years of the adoption of this plan of action will be commemorated, and which is a platform that promotes a discussion on the most outstanding advances on the matter in recent years and the challenges facing the new development agenda. Colombia is currently supporting the preparation of this commemoration through its active participation as member of the Bureau of the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation. During this celebration, my country will be eager to play a role regarding the experience that our country has had in promoting this cooperation. Colombia will be ready to show its lessons learned from the cooperation actions that has made in recent years, sharing strengths, learnings, and good practices in strategic areas of development. Regarding that, the theme of the conference will be the role of the SSC, South-South Cooperation and Triangular Cooperation in the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals within the framework of the 2030 Agenda. We are optimistic that the BAPA 40+40 will be an opportunity to strengthen South-South cooperation and its principles, as well as to advocate the agenda of this modality. Also will optimize the role of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. As a result of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the efforts of the achieved SDGs, since 2010, Colombia has reinforced its horizontal bilateral relations, promoting a coherent development from the vision on the national priorities. At the bilateral level, Colombia currently has 17 regular current programs with 18 countries, and at a regional level, 4 cooperation strategies and 1 security strategy in Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa. Concluding, developing countries are aware of the importance of establishing common efforts to effectively implementation of the 2030 Agenda. We have established spaces for discussion in the framework of regional consensus in order to define interests and general alliances and to advance in overcoming the development challenges inherent to the region. For this reason, my country has an active participation in the cooperation groups of CELAC, UNASUR, Mesoamerica Project, Pacific Alliance, and the Ibero-American Group, among others. Thank you very much.
Gracias, señor embajador. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite the representative of FAO to make a statement.
Thank you very much. I congratulate you for the organization of the event. I also want to recognize the presence of the Deputy Secretary General, the Administration UNDP, and Excellencies. We really welcome your vision and your views exchanged today. And this for us is really a guidance that we will follow because it will really contribute to improve the work that we are really working, the work that we are really doing. I would like just to start by saying that in Rome, today's South-South cooperation is really celebrated jointly with the IFAD and the WFP. And following, of course, what is going to happen in Turkey, and I would like to say that at the upcoming Global South-South Development Expo in Turkey at the end of November, of course, the RBAs, the Rome-based agencies, are really collaborating on a joint session to be themed the Accelerating Country-Led Progress Towards Zero Hunger through joint and complementary efforts of the Rome-based agencies. So this is to show also that in, of course, advancing and working together on South-South cooperation, we are really bringing together this vision of working together as UN, together with member states, of course, under their leadership. Let me say that the importance of South-South cooperation as a tool to share knowledge and development solutions, as was clearly said and well said, and to build networks among countries of the Global South to achieve sustainable development towards Agenda 2030 cannot really be underestimated. And for over 20 years, FAO has been really facilitating the sharing of practical development solutions in food and agriculture. And we have been working together with almost 90 host countries and more than 30 providers and triangular partners. There are so many examples that we really are highlighting this collaboration. So in order not to take much time, let me just say that truly to respond to the growing demand for the South-South cooperation, we have to come together, joint efforts to mainstream South-South cooperation throughout our respective organizations and, of course, working together with member states. And therefore, is really essential to mobilize South-South cooperation as a complementary instrument to North-South cooperation, and as a means to deliver in our mandates and the broader sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And for the last comment, I invite the representative of Singapore.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. We are very pleased to join all our friends here to celebrate South-South Cooperation Day. South-South cooperation is a very important pillar of Singapore's foreign policy and our overseas technical assistance program. We believe that South-South cooperation can be a powerful engine for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Very quickly, 3 points. First, Singapore established its own technical assistance program known as the Singapore Cooperation Program in 1992, with the aim of sharing our developmental experience and to provide technical assistance and capacity building. And since 1992, we have trained 1,115,000 participants entirely from the developing world within the Group of 77 and China. Recently, we have aligned our technical cooperation program to the Agenda 2030 so that it is fully in keeping with the 17 goals. The second point that I wanted to make is that it's very important in our view to emphasize the role of regional organizations and sub-regional organizations as vectors and dynamos of South-South cooperation. Within our own region, for example, in ASEAN, a sub-regional organization, we have an initiative called the Initiative for ASEAN Integration. And in the context of that initiative, Singapore has established training centers in some of our ASEAN countries. And we believe that the role of sub-regional organization is something that needs to be studied and encouraged further in the context of the Buenos Aires conference. The last point that I wanted to say is that Singapore is looking forward to the Buenos Aires conference. We look forward to working with all of you to make the conference a very successful one. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the comments. And now I would like to invite if any member of the panel who wants to make a comment. I understand the Deputy Secretary General wants to say something.
It would not be Amina Mohammed if she didn't want to say something. Thank you very much. I very much appreciated all the comments. And I think one of the initiatives, South-South Cooperation, is incredibly important and at the core of whether we are really getting a truly universal agenda on track or not. And so I welcome the remarks of Akim Steiner on the new norm with a distinct purpose, and then the kind of work that we have to do through the reforms to make sure that it is embedded in the work that the development system does at the country level to support countries, make those partnerships a reality, but underscoring the support that China gives for capacity building and that Japan talked about in terms of knowledge sharing as well. So I think we certainly have our work cut out for us. And if we are, as Ireland spoke to, refreshing the vision, and we're actually, we hear a lot of commitment here to reinforcing that solidarity behind the ideology and the concepts and the realities that it must become at scale. Then I would say in what Brazil has just offered in that opportunity for the for BAPA in Argentina is the process itself now, and what we can do to engage with that, to shape the narrative, the very distinct outcomes, the alignment with what we're already doing, so that we are really getting it integrated into the mainstream of transitioning from one development paradigm to another. And beyond that framework, really making sure that we make sense of the Addis Ababa agreement for financing that brings in so many more elements than just the finance part of it. And I think those all need to be aligned. And I know that member states are looking at the alignment of these various resolutions and how to make them more effective. What better a place than the platform of South-South Cooperation to really begin to make that a reality? It will affect so many different levels of our developing countries and bring, I think, a universal approach that just changes the way we do things, which is what the UN Agenda 2030 does. But I also think that it aligns well with other regional initiatives, and in particular I can speak to Agenda 2063, and I think that that's a big opportunity to take with many partners in this room already embarking upon investments in that region. So thank you for allowing us to share with you a very special day, but also renewing our commitment to making this a central part of the work that we do in the development system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador, you want to say something? Yes, please.
Briefly, sorry, Jorge, it's only to thank all the mentions you made to Argentina and to the next BAPA plus 40 that we are going to host in Buenos Aires. And I think we should be very, very careful to really use Antalia's meeting to build this roadmap in order to have a successful conference in Buenos Aires in 2019. So we are going to support, of course, Turkey in their efforts to have a great conference and this roadmap that we need for Buenos Aires. Thank you. Thank you so much.
To thank the panels, all the participants, all the member states that made comments and suggestions on the colleagues of the UN system, and our office is committed to supporting all your efforts to ensure a process and to have more and better South-South cooperation to build a better world. Thank you very much, and again, happy UN Day for South-South cooperation.